As part of our ongoing conversation about the city's proposed annexation, we're speaking today with Mark Figg, a Bloomington native who is a longtime real estate professional and business leader. Mark, you own the Figg Property Group and Kirkwood Property Management. In 2019 and 2020, you were chairman of the board of the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation and president of the Apartment Association. And you were on the steering committee that oversaw the completion of Bloomington's most recent housing study in 2020. So given that background, we'll be focusing on the role of annexation vis-a-vis our community's housing issues. So how would you describe Bloomington's housing situation right now?
Well, I think the best way to just capsulize it is we have a supply and demand imbalance. We don't have enough to supply to meet the demand. And I believe that's been coming for quite some time, probably over the last 20 years, but really become more pronounced the last 10 to 15, especially lately.
So you've obviously seen that not only in your professional capacity, but also working with the steering committee for the housing study. What did the housing study tell us about the kinds of housing forms that Bloomington needs? And how do you think that the updated UDO and the zoning changes can help with that?
Well, that housing study was great because, and it was timely because, remember we passed the UDO in the city, the new development ordinance, which then needed to have a map drawn to match those goals. So the housing study really informed that process through city council to be able to decide, okay, what zoning do we want where? So that document, basically said that we need housing of all types, rental and owned, affordable and, expensive, all across the board. And, really called that out. So the new map that was drawn really did match that. The greatest example I can give with that was, obviously student housing always is an issue. And so the city UDO allowed more density close to the university for that, and actually has basically a student housing designation. So you can already see evidence of that with Brownstone Terrace has been demolished at 14th and Walnut, is going to have over 1,000 beds right next to campus. And then there's a development on the old Motel 6 site on North Walnut Street, further to the north, around 15th, 16th Street, I guess it'd be. So,
right, so the whole theme being compact urban form, more density. And how do you think that annexation can help us do that?
Well, annexation will allow some other parcels that are not in the city now to be under a new zoning, which would be the UDO. I mean, a zoning designation would have to be set for those annexed properties that will become the city. And that will allow the UDO to apply to those and allow more density. I think the primary reason that I am in favor of housing, annexation or annexing ground for new housing is the county has really not been allowing density in some areas that would be annexed. Probably the most recent one is the SOMO development, which is on South Rogers near that road, I believe. And that was a Tom Weininger proposed development. It's going to be single family houses, about 95 of those. The proposal was for 190 homes that would be much more affordable and take the same amount of land, but allow 190 people to live there. The county commissioners voted that down, even with a favorable recommendation from the plan commission. So had the city UDO applied to that property, it's very likely that would occur. It's good for two reasons. You house more people, and it's better for the environment because you put more people on a piece of land that stops more sprawl from taking place. And coincidentally, that development to occur in either case, even though it's in the county, has city sewer. So, I think one of the primary reasons to allow annexation to occur is for the city to continue to, expand the utility services, because you cannot make a dense development without city sewer. And the county doesn't have sewer in effect.
planning is concerned.
And I would have to say, I know there are exceptions to everything, but if you were, let's just say you were going to take a neighborhood in the county on 40 acres and make your own sewer system for that neighborhood, that's something homeowners probably are not going to be very, very happy about, because basically if you're in a neighborhood that has its own sewer system, all the neighbors are kind of on the hook for maintaining that. That's a pretty complicated thing, and it's not a risk most people want to take necessarily.
Right. So you have been a business leader in our community, and you've sat in an advisory capacity on the BDC and the Apartment Association. As far as economic development issues are concerned, specifically, what are the implications of a scarcity of housing for our economic climate and our economic future?
Well, I've been on the BEDC board for many years, and my comments are not BEDC comments. These are personal to me. The BEDC is discussing it now, but not necessarily going to take a position, or, hasn't concluded that. But my opinion is, and it's not just my opinion, our board of Bloomington Economic Development Corporation actually made housing scarcity our #1 economic development impediment. So, and that's been over the last couple of years, which we've never had worried about that. It's always about job creation and infrastructure and land for, employers and, zoning to match that. It's all about housing now. So we have companies that are actively growing here. We have companies that want to come here, and, our housing cost is always a concern, but housing scarcity is a really a big concern, because you can create a job, but if that person doesn't have somewhere to live, it just pretty much eliminates Bloomington from consideration on many levels.
So those are conversations that you were privy to with CEOs of corporations that were seeking to relocate?
Yes. Yeah.
So some that perhaps hesitated because of the housing situation?
There's no question that that's true. And also, Cook, one of our major, industrial employers in Bloomington, has been, beating that drum for several years now, because they have employees and need to grow so much, and they just don't have infrastructure or there's just not housing to fulfill those needs. And, a lot of people also live in other counties and come here, which that's not a bad thing. But, if we can have those employees that are on a Monroe County payroll, pay, taxes in Bloomington, that would be nice. So we just need to have more supply. But I think the other thing I'm really worried about, or I think about, is we have this supply and demand imbalance and these problems now. One of the things that I think about is, we do probably have an inflationary environment, which generally translates into interest rate increases. Interest rates now are at historic lows. So we talk about housing prices being so high right now. Well, they will only go up, because it's not just the price of the home. Most people have a mortgage. If you pay more interest, it's less affordable. So, we really do need to address this now to be able to, it's still going to be a problem even if we address it now, but it will be hopefully less of a problem.
So I understand, Mark, that you personally live in an area proposed for annexation, and you've come out publicly in favor of annexation. Your neighbors don't necessarily agree with you.
Yeah.
What do you say to them to convince them that annexation is in their best interest?
Yeah. Well, we're in area 2 and have been for 5 years or so. And, I think our neighborhood had a waiver. I'm sure it had a waiver to get city sewer, back then. And I'm not into the vagaries of the legal machinations of how that all plays out in terms of validity of those documents. But I will say that, my taxes are going to go up. I've never been in favor of higher taxes, but I do believe that, I have 4 sons, and I'd love to see them have great futures and be able to buy homes and have opportunities. And, I would say to my neighbors that we can sustain higher real estate taxes. It is going to be, it's not nothing. It's a real amount of money, but I think we can sustain higher taxes better than we can sustain continuing drastic price increases in housing. So, I mean, it's something to remember. I mean, I think our city and county, our community successfully grew over a long period of time and was managed well through those times, because in prior years, we had a 2-mile fringe, which was part of I'm assuming that was a state law that allowed cities to plan out a couple miles around them. And then later we had the AFA, or the area intended for future annexation. So with that, in effect, cities could plan on density, surrounding what's existing in the city. And I think part of the problem is when that went away, and then the Cruzan administration in the city stopped annexing because the economics didn't seem good, for like taking a neighborhood and providing trash and doing all those things. Maybe it wasn't exactly a net positive, but I think the larger message is having zoning and infrastructure planning control, was a good thing. And it allowed developers and community builders to have a clear path on what to do next. And I feel like since, that's been 17 years, I think, since we did our last, normal annexation. I just think that's a big part of the reason we now are where we are. And the building permits clearly state that, in spite of the demand here in Bloomington and Monroe County, we have continued to not build, even at the levels that we had pre-depression, 08. We're still not building homes back to that level, which is crazy to me. If you don't annex and have property that has clear zoning and infrastructure to match, we're not going to keep growing our housing stock. It just, the county has clearly signaled based on recent decisions that they're not going to densify. So it's just the wrong way to go. So here's the thing. If the current city boundaries only contain a very fixed amount of land on which more development can occur. And so the land that's left in the city now really can't satisfy that demand that's in the market. So either the city has to expand and annex to be able to allow more development, or the county has to allow more development. It really is kind of one or the other. And if not, then it won't occur. What the city has in its boundaries now cannot begin to satisfy the need. It's just not possible without annexation. That's really the main message.